All right, back again for our Wednesday reading of The Five People You Meet in Heaven. We're beginning on page 93. We're going to go to page 102. It seems like a longer section than normally I give you. I want to point a couple things out real quick before we get going. I've had a couple of you email me and talk about getting behind because the reading is so difficult and things like that. I have to stress to you guys, this book is written on a middle school level. This reading cannot be difficult. Okay, if this reading is difficult for you, we need to figure out what's going on so that we can fix that because it is going to get harder. Um, Normally, kids don't get both of these books. I've never taught this book in classes because really I'm teaching books that are below your grade level. I'm doing this because I wanted your this. I wanted to give you some sort of. We have to have school. We're not just abandoning ship because of the coronavirus. It doesn't dictate what we're going to do. All right. So we still wanted to have school. We still wanted your diploma to matter more than a lot of your public school friends who are doing literally nothing. All right. And that's going to hurt them down the road. Now, English class, we have a little more freedom. So I decided, hey, look, these kids have got so much stress on their classes. Let's give them something easy. And to have people telling me how difficult this is just really kind of knocked me over. I couldn't understand it. So I want you guys to understand that the other thing that goes with this is the amount of reading. 7 or 8 pages a night is again very small. My sixth grader has to read more sometimes than that. So you guys can do this. What you need to do is master the skill of time management and do this in periods where you know you can. Some of you can knock this all out in one day. You can get focused and motivated and do it, and good to you. Some of you need to break it up into pieces. What you don't need to do is to wait until Sunday to try to sit down and do it all when you know you're not good at focusing. And I think several of you who are behind right now, that's what happened. Okay. So some of you may have looked like this, oh my gosh, we got to read almost 10 pages today. Say that out loud and see how silly it sounds. Okay. Guys, you can read through this in no amount of time. All right. It's not hard. You don't have to stop and go, what is that word, or do any of that. So relax, quit throwing yourselves pity parties. We learned about that in Tuesdays with Maury, and realize that you have more time than you think you do, and you have more ability than you think you do. Okay. All right. Lecture over. Let's get into the actual book today. So we come into it today is Eddie's birthday section again, but this is actually a continuation of an earlier one. We have the whole he was going to go to the track with his coworker Noel, and now he's actually there, and that's what we get here. So again, the sad part right now is that Eddie is spending his birthday instead of at home with his wife. It's birthday. It says I think it's 39. Yeah, he's going to go and spend it with this person who he works with. Now, by the way, there's nothing in this section either that indicates they have any kind of relationship, that Eddie's in any way being unfaithful to his wife. It seems like she's just a friend. So it seems suspicious to me, but that's just me. All right. Um, so he wins some money at the track, but then he does what any degenerate gambler does. They won once, they think they can win again. You know, he's got almost $800. I forget what he started with. It wasn't anywhere close to that. I think he said like $40, but he's turned it into a massive increase. And instead of saying, awesome, let's call it a day, he thinks he can keep this winning streak going, and keeps going. And he ends up losing all that money. Says he limps. This is the part that I want to read. He limps to a payphone and drops in a nickel. Marguerite answers. Eddie tells her the news. Noelle is right. She is not happy. She tells him to come home. He tells her to stop telling him what to do. We have a baby coming, she scolds. You can't keep behaving like this. Eddie hangs up the phone with the heat behind his ears. He goes back to Noelle, who is eating peanuts at the railing. So we get this. They have a child on the way, and what it is they're adopting. They're in line to adopt a kid. He calls her to tell her he's won all this money, and she's not happy, which tells you a little bit about Noelle. I'm not Noelle, about Marguerite. I mean, most people would be excited. Remember, $800 back then means a lot. The payphone was a nickel, so it tells you $800 is a lot of money, and she's not happy. She's like, we have a child coming. You have to behave differently. And he reacts like most guys. You can't tell me what to do. Hangs up and keeps acting like a jerk. Now, and I'll sum this part up. Marguerite gets upset about this, and not like mad upset, but she knows what's going to happen. She knows that he's angry at her. She knows she's angry, and she wants to fix this. So she gets in the car and just going to drive to the track to see him. On the way, two moronic 17-year-olds are doing some nonsense and decide to drop bottles on cars, or drop bottles from up high. I don't think they're trying to directly drop them on cars. But one of them does, and it hits Marguerite's car. It causes her to wreck, and she's hurt pretty bad. Says this is the description. Her body is tossed like a doll, slamming against the door and the dashboard and the steering wheel, lacerating her liver and breaking her arm and thumping her head so hard she loses touch with the sound of the evening. She does not hear the screeching of cars. She does not hear the honking of horns. She does not hear the retreat of rubber-soled sneakers running down the Leicester Street overpass and off into the night. So she's injured severely, going to get her husband, who should be at home with her. Now, you got to think that's going to be something that weighs on him, all right? And also it's going to cause a big issue in their relationship, okay? She does survive. It says she's confined to bed rest for 6 months. Her injured liver recovered eventually, but the expense and the delay cost them the adoption. So they end up losing this child. They don't get it, and they never do. They never get around to where they can. The expenses of her injuries and just life in general prevent it, and then eventually they get to a point where they think they're too old. So they never have that part of their life. It says Eddie never goes to the track again. It says he quits really spending time with Noelle, and eventually their relationship is kind of repaired, but it takes time. We also see in this section, I'm on 96 here, this whole long section here, we see how time is passing. We see a lot of the rides they had at this pier that the two of them were, when they were young, they spent time with, are slowly being torn down and replaced with other things. And it even talks about Eddie telling her about this, and this is a little later in the reading, but she says it sounds like someone else's summer. So to the point where she feels like it's not even like it was. It's a different place to her. So then we get what happens with her later. She ends up having something wrong with, can you bring me that, please, Maddox? I don't know who is texting me a million times, but guys, give me a second. Let me figure out why somebody won't leave me alone on the phone. It's my wife. Seeing her write anything about wives. She's just sent me probably 40 pictures. Okay, let me finish this, and then I'll look at those and respond to her in a minute. I'm not betting the horses. I'm teaching a class, so I feel okay with that. So we got 3 years later, she's breading chicken cutlets in the kitchen of their apartment, the one they had had all this time long after Eddie's mother had died, because Marguerite said it reminded her when they were kids, and she liked to see the old carousel out the window. Suddenly, without warning, the fingers of her right hand stretched open uncontrollably. They moved backward. They would not close. The cutlet slid from her palm. It fell into the sink. Her arm throbbed. Her breathing quickened. She stared for a moment at the hand with locked fingers that appeared to belong to someone else, someone gripping a large invisible jar. Then everything went dizzy. So we see his wife's got some issues. They don't say it's directly. I don't think they say it's directly related to the head injury from the wreck. But I mean, I would think that's definitely what happened. They say it's a tumor on her brain, and her decline would be like many others. Treatments that made the disease seem mild, hair falling out in patches, mornings spent with noisy radiation machines, and evenings spent vomiting in a hospital toilet. So she's got cancer, which, okay, cancer is not caused by the car wreck, but she may have had some damage that eventually, made this gave it a better chance to happen. All right, we don't really know what does and doesn't cause cancer. We have tons of ideas with it, but there's just something in your body triggers wrong and it starts producing cancer cells. So, but it's a death sentence for her, especially in this time period. So we get this like tender scene of them as they're going through this, as he's trying to help her through it. We get that they are actually. This is like what real love looks like, guys. It's not the butterflies in your stomach, staring at each other in the eyes for hours on end, and just can't sleep when you're not with the person. That's movie love. That's not real, okay? I mean, it's nice to believe that it is, and you may have that temporarily with someone, but this is what it's really about. It's this: when someone needs you, you're there for them, no matter what, and through everything, through thick and thin, through good and bad, all of it, and that's what we see with these two. But eventually, she does pass away. She's 47 when it happens, and this wrecks Eddie. It obviously destroys him. So then we get this scene of they spend what feels like days, if not weeks, if not years, just in heaven, spending time together, going from wedding to wedding, and just catching each other up with everything. And again, this is a part that kind of I don't really I feel like this could be different. I don't like that he does this. I don't like that he spends all this time. I get it. It's hard to leave. It was not hard to leave the last three. They weren't people who really had big bearing on his life. But why does he want to leave this part of heaven and lose his wife again? Of course, he's not thinking about, he's going to see her again. She asks some questions about stuff. She asks him about his leg. She asks him about the war, and he says, I lost myself back then. And she tells him, no, he didn't. And he thinks, yes, he did. So we're starting to see kind of the lesson developing for them here. This is a really short section. We're on the top of page 100. I want to read it. It says, at times there in heaven, the two of them would lie down together, but they didn't sleep. On earth, Marguerite said, when you fell asleep, you sometimes dreamed your heaven, and those dreams helped to form it. But there was no reason for such dreams now. Instead, Eddie held her shoulders and nuzzled in her hair and took long, deep breaths. At one point, he asked his wife if God knew he was here. She smiled and said, of course. Even when Eddie admitted that some of his life he'd spent hiding from God and the rest of the time he thought he went unnoticed. Now, think about how sad that is. Eddie felt like God just didn't care and didn't notice. And she's pointing out that's not true. He knows where you are at all times. All right. Okay, so now we get into the last little bit of today's reading, and this is the fourth lesson, the lesson his wife is there for him for. All right. She says, and we're on 100, still near the bottom. She turned to him. You had to live without love for many years, didn't you? Eddie said nothing. You felt that it was snatched away, that I left you too soon. He lowered himself slowly. Her lavender dress was spread before him. You did leave too soon, he said. You were angry with me. No. Her eyes flashed. Okay, yes. There was a reason to it all, she said. What reason? He said. How could there be a reason? You died. You were 47. You were the best person any of us knew, and you died, and you lost everything. And I lost everything. I lost the only woman I ever loved. And she took his hands. No, you didn't. I was right here, and you loved me anyway. Now, this is that whole speech we get when we lose someone close to us about, that, well, there's a, you ask yourself, why did this happen? Why did this young child die from cancer? Or why did this person who's never done anything wrong suddenly, die of cancer or a heart attack or whatever? And people tell you things like, well, there's a reason for everything. And we hate that answer. We really do, because it makes it feel like God sat down and was writing out steps to whatever he wanted. And, so-and-so having to die was part of it. And it feels like you're being, treated unfairly. But we're going to see that's not the case. And she also points out something else. She's like, just because I died, I didn't leave. And this is the lesson she's trying to teach him. Here it is. She says, lost love is still love, Eddie. It takes a different form, that's all. You can't see their smile or bring them food or tussle their hair or move them around a dance floor. But when those senses weaken, another heightens. Memory. Memory becomes your partner. You nurture it, you hold it, you dance with it. Life has to end, she said. Love doesn't. Which there's your key thing, is the fact that, just because someone's not physically there anymore doesn't mean that stops. And we got that from Tuesdays with Maury. The whole thing about love ends a life, not a relationship. We're seeing that again. She talks about how she could even feel his love in heaven because it was so strong. She could still feel it. And that's really a beautiful sentiment. Okay. So she said I'm saving this one. She means there was one more room they were going to go into, and it was kind of like the room they were married in. And he does something kind of cool here. He says, can I ask you something? He said, yes. She says, how come you look the way you look the day I married you? He's asking her, he meets her in heaven, and she looks like she does when she was young. She says, I thought you'd like it that way. He thought for a moment, can you change it? Change it. She looked amused. To what? To the end. She lowered her arms. I wasn't so pretty at the end. Eddie shook his head as if to say, not true. Could you? And then we get this really tender image of her changing into who she was the day she passed away. And that's what Eddie really wanted, was to have what, not just the good, but he wanted all of it, because he really loves his wife. All right. This is when he moved his head back. She was 47 again, the web of lines behind her eyes, the thinner hair, the looser skin beneath the chin. She smiled and he smiled, and she was to him as beautiful as ever. And he closed his eyes and said for the first time what he'd been feeling from the moment when he saw her again. I don't want to go on. I want to stay here. When he opened his eyes, his arm still held her shape, but she was gone, and so was everything else. So, he basically has to be forced out of this one, which we all would, all right? But he wants to stay with her, and then that ends our reading today. That gets us through the fourth person, all right? So in this one, he learns about the concept of love is not this thing that only applies to a physical possession, that if you truly love someone, it continues after their death, and that's a really powerful thing, all right? Okay, guys, getting better with these videos, keeping them kind of condensed. I'm trying to knock them all out in one day here. So we're going to stop there. We're going to pick up on 102, and we're down to 12 pages left. All right. Now, by the way, we went through all that section in right about 15 minutes. And yes, we didn't read all of it, but we did a lot of discussion of it in 15 minutes. You can do the readings. All right. I promise you, you're capable. You're capable of so much more than you possibly think. All right. So let me pause this here, and we'll pick up with the next video in just a little bit. Thank you guys again for your time and your effort. It's really appreciated.